The house next door had been empty for years, its windows like dead eyes staring into the dusk. The for sale sign out front was so weathered it looked like it had grown roots. The red letters faded to a sickly pink. Nobody in Castle Rock talked about Honor 12 Maple Lane anymore. Not since the last owners left in a hurry back in '09. They didn't say why, but folks whispered about lights flickering in rooms that shouldn't have power, about shadows that didn't match the shapes of anything human. Small towns hold on to stories like that, even when they're half forgotten. Jake Harmon, who'd moved into 110 Maple Lane last spring, didn't believe in ghost stories. He was 42, a high school math teacher with a practical streak wider than the Penobscot River. His wife, Clara, had wanted to stay in Portland, but Jake had fallen for the old colonial's charm. Creaky floors, wraparound porch, and a price that didn't make his eyes water. "It's a fresh start," he'd told her, and she'd nodded, though her smile was thin. Their marriage was fraying, and they both knew it. The house was supposed to be a fix, a way to stitch things back together. But by October, with the leaves bleeding red across the lawn, Jake wasn't so sure. It started the first week of the month, when the nights turned crisp and the air smelled of wood smoke. Jake was up late, grading papers at the kitchen table, a glass of bourbon sweating beside him. The clock ticked past midnight, and he glanced out the window above the sink, the one that faced the empty house next door. That's when he saw it. A figure stood in the upstairs window of 112 Maple Lane, second from the left. Motionless. Just a silhouette, darker than the darkness behind it, but Jake could feel the weight of its gaze. It wasn't a reflection, wasn't a trick of the light. It was watching. His skin prickled, and he set the bourbon down, the glass clinking too loud in the quiet. He stared back, waiting for it to move, to prove it was just some kid messing around or a curtain caught in the breeze. But it didn't. It just stood there, staring. "Clara," he called, his voice rougher than he meant. No answer. She was upstairs, probably asleep, or pretending to be. They hadn't shared a bed in weeks. He grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and stepped outside, the October chill biting through his flannel. The neighboring house loomed, its clapboards peeling like old skin. He swept the beam across the upstairs windows, but the figure was gone. Just empty glass, reflecting the moon. He stood there, heart thumping, feeling foolish but not foolish enough to go closer. Not yet. The next night, he watched the window again. Same time, same place. There it was, motionless, a black cutout against the dim glow of the room. Jake's breath caught, and he gripped the edge of the sink until his knuckles whitened. He didn't tell Clara. She'd say he was tired, stressed, seeing things. Maybe he was, but he started checking every night, like a ritual. Midnight, bourbon, window, figure. Always there, always still. By the third night, he couldn't stand it. He called Tommy Whitaker, the local realtor who'd sold them the house. Tommy was a good old boy, all grins and handshakes, but his voice tightened when Jake mentioned 112 Maple Lane. "Nobody's been in that place since the Donovans left," Tommy said. "Bank owns it now. You sure you saw something?" "Positive," Jake said. "Someone's in there." Tommy promised to check, but when he called back the next day, he sounded uneasy. "Place is locked up tight, Jake. No signs of a break-in. Windows are boarded on the inside, too. You sure it wasn't, I don't know, a reflection?" Jake wasn't sure of anything anymore, but he thanked Tommy and hung up. That night, he didn't wait for midnight. He grabbed a crowbar from the garage and marched across the lawn, the grass crunching under his boots. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. He pried open the back door of 112, the wood splintering with a sound like a bone snapping. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and something sharper, like rust or old blood. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step louder than the last. Upstairs, the hallway was a tunnel of shadows, the boarded windows letting in slivers of moonlight. He checked the room with the window where he'd seen the figure. Empty. Just dust and peeling wallpaper, curling like dead leaves. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there in years. But when he turned to leave, he heard it. A soft, deliberate tap from the next room. He froze, crowbar heavy in his hand. Another tap, then another. Like someone knocking, slow and patient, waiting for him to answer. His mouth went dry, and he backed out, down the stairs, out the door, not stopping until he was back in his own kitchen, locking the door behind him. Clara noticed the change in him. "You're jumpy," she said one morning, her eyes narrowing over her coffee mug. "What's going on?" "Nothing," he lied. He couldn't tell her about the figure, about the tapping that followed him into his dreams. She'd think he was cracking up, and maybe he was. The next night, he didn't go to the kitchen. He stayed in the living room, pretending to read, but his eyes kept drifting to the window. At midnight, the air in the house shifted, like a door had opened somewhere. He heard Clara gasp upstairs. Heart pounding, he ran to their bedroom, where she stood at the window, her face pale as bone. "Jake," she whispered, pointing. "What is that?" In the window of 112 Maple Lane, the figure stood. But it wasn't alone. Another silhouette had joined it, then another, until the entire upstairs was filled with them, motionless, staring. Their shapes wrong, too tall, too thin. Jake grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her away from the window, but the air grew colder, heavier, pressing down like a storm about to break. The tapping started again, not from next door, but from inside their own house. Slow, deliberate, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Jake's breath hitched as he realized something worse than the figures themselves. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting, and they weren't in the empty house next door. They were already here,